Thank you for downloading another Pod One Media podcast recorded in the great city of Houston.
Are you a small business owner or an influencer looking to up your marketing game? Are you seeking tips and strategies to build your brand? If the answer is yes, then this podcast is for you. So you've come up with a fantastic podcast idea and you need some tips to get up, running and heard. Or perhaps you've already gained your good bunch of listeners, but you feel the right time has come to up your podcasting game. Growing your podcast audience is something you should dedicate just as much time and passion as you do when crafting and recording each podcast episode of yours. But how do you do it? Whether you're a beginner or a fully fledged professional, we're providing you with these handy tips to increase your podcast listeners. How to boost your podcast? Follow these tips provided getting the basics right is a key to get more podcast listeners. Going that extra mile in the very beginning of your promotion strategy will pave the way to fantastic long-term benefits. Start with your personal email contacts and your social media followers. Set a clear goal, for instance aiming for the Apple Podcast New and Noteworthy section. Did you know Apple Podcasts counts for as much as 70% of podcasts listens and downloads? Tip 1. Focus on the launch. This is crucial. If you want to gain engaged listeners, the launch goes far beyond reaching as many people as possible. It's about reaching as many people likely to find your topic relevant. That's why relying on a previously built audience can help a lot. Make your podcast launch day a digital event, be it on Facebook or Instagram story, or an exclusive extra episode as a gift for all those listeners who download you. Get creative. If you've already launched, that doesn't mean you cannot think of some event in order to get more engagement from your audience, more shares, and eventually new podcast listeners from your listeners' circles. Tip 2. Email is your friend. It's fundamental because it's where closer connections happen. If people allow you to their email, they're also opening their heart to you and your podcast. It's ideal that you start building your email list before your podcast launches. That way you can let your contacts know you're live. The best way to keep on collecting contacts throughout the podcast is to build an opt-in landing page. It's a web page that explains to your current and potential podcast listeners why they should receive your news in their inbox, followed by the chance to sign up for them. Reasons are: A. Because you'll know they are actually interested. B. Because that gives you more. C. For purely legal reasons, you can't spam people. Give a brief and enticing summary of each episode and a preview of the upcoming one. Ask politely to be rated and reviewed on Apple Podcast. While it's quicker to go with an email template, try your best to customize your email to the receiving end. Make sure you include the chance to share the email with friends, an extra tip to get new, engaged listeners for your podcast. Whether or not you have an opt-in list, do email people you know personally if you know they're interested in your podcast topic, and do email pioneers and influencers asking them for advice and to share some episodes with their network. Who knows, they may be your next podcast guests. So, you're thinking about starting a company podcast, but you haven't got round to doing it yet. We give you 3 reasons why this form of audio content might be just what your business's content strategy needs. In this digital age, podcasts make marketing sense. Less people are reading, and more people own mobile devices, meaning you need to adapt your content strategy to cater to these changes, and when done right, this easily shareable content will allow your business's message to reach far and wide. 1. Podcasts are adaptable content. Podcasts can be listened to anywhere and anytime. How people consume content is changing. People are watching less TV and switching to online platforms, and most people don't have time to read articles, meaning it's getting harder and harder to reach potential customers. Like most audio content, podcasts are quick and easy to consume, but what further sets them apart is that they don't require undivided attention. Chris Drucker states the speed appeal of podcasts. The average blog posts is approximately 700 words, which can be read in about 5 minutes. However, the average podcast is 35 minutes, which translates into 4,550 words, the equivalent of 6.5 blog posts. Basically, podcasts can slip easily into our daily lives, and this is appealing to audiences. People need content which they can digest while doing other tasks. Time is the most precious commodity in modern-day living, and podcasts provide businesses with a way to effectively reach consumers while doing other activities. This means that your opportunity to reach your consumer is limitless. Whether they are cooking, running or traveling, they can have their podcast with them. Entrepreneur.com confirms this idea. Your podcast won't take them away from those activities. It will enrich them. 2. You can sway your consumers' decisions. Unlike print advertising, podcasts allow your business to develop a personality and a literal voice, which is a powerful tool when seeking to influence your target consumers' decisions. By creating a podcast, you can confirm your brand's identity and become seen as a valid source of information in any given field. Harvard Business Review reiterates this idea by stating that podcasters can build a bond of trust through analysis, insight, and storytelling. Once you have this relationship of trust with your customers, it's a strong way to be able to influence them during decision-making processes, and USA Today states that hosting a show can definitely help establish you as an expert, a thought leader, and as such it's a unique opportunity. 3. You can create timeless content. Podcasts have a long and indefinite shelf life. This final point could be seen both positively and negatively. However, if good content is created, it's undeniably a positive point. You are creating company advertising for free with no time limit. It also means that old customers will return to your brand for information, and new ones will seek you out. Forbes.com confirms this idea. Podcasts aren't a one-time creation. Once you've recorded them, they'll be available from your channel indefinitely. In that way, they have a similar shelf life to evergreen content, so long as you're choosing topics with an intent to last. This means you will really need to plan each piece of content carefully and be prepared to adjust your content depending on how it's received by your listeners to make sure you continue to be seen as a reliable information source. As the number of people listening to podcasts rapidly increases, it makes increasing sense to tap into this market for your business. Entrepreneur.com gives the incredible fact that over the last 10 years, the number of people who have listened to a podcast has more than tripled. Furthermore, podcasts make economical sense. They require minimal investment and technology to get started. Once integrated into your content plan, they allow you to reach a wider customer base, including niche audiences, with the main resource required being your time to ensure that the content you produce is worth listening to for years to come. All big businesses have been podcasting for a long time, and nowadays most smaller businesses are tapping into the medium to reach greater audiences and increase profits. So if you haven't already begun podcasting, you might want to start. We recommend all prepare some kind of podcast script or outline before they hit the red button. Talking intelligently, smoothly, and clearly is challenging without practice. During the recording, you can focus on your mechanics, like enunciating, removing filler words, and controlling your tone and volume. Over time, you'll be able to reduce your podcast script to a simple outline with notes. Here are a few tips that will help you craft an engaging podcast script. Keep it conversational. The biggest challenge of writing a podcast script is keeping it conversational. If you aren't careful, reading a podcast script can lead to a flat, monotone delivery. A lot of podcasters find it useful to speak their script, like a rehearsal for their recording, with a speech-to-text tool open to dictate their words. This creates a natural pattern and puts your words on a page so you can read them during your recording. Just make sure to give it an edit to smooth out rough patches and include all your information. Google Docs has a free tool that comes in handy here. You can even use this as your podcast transcript. A good podcast script includes delivery notes. These are notes within your script that indicate pauses, emphasis, laughs, sighs, and other dramatic effects. These elements breathe life into your podcast script, so it feels natural. Make sure to read your podcast script aloud with your delivery notes so they sound genuine. Allow for some riffing. Just because you write a podcast script before your recording doesn't mean you are bound to it. It's quite alright to go off script during your recording if you think of something important or valuable on the spot. If you decide you don't like it, you can always edit it out later. That said, be mindful about going off on irrelevant tangents. If you add a bunch of fluff content to your recording, you're just wasting time in front of the microphone, and you will have much more to edit out later. Describe the scene. Podcasting is an audio medium, which means our audience doesn't have any visual cues. If you refer to something, like an image, person, or video, make sure to describe it well, so your listeners can picture it in their mind. Your descriptions should be detailed and vibrant. It sounds easy, but this is a hard skill to master. You may find it is odd to speak to people who aren't in the room, who can't see what you see. It may help to think of recording a podcast like talking to someone on the phone. This doesn't mean you need to give a detailed description of everything you say, but you'll want to be aware of any concepts, images, or topics that need extra description for your listeners who are effectively blind. Maintain a reasonable pace. The best podcast episodes maintain a consistent pace that keeps listeners engaged. A good pace is not too fast and not too slow. There shouldn't be any long, unexplained pauses. And there shouldn't be any moments where you talk too fast to be understood. Use segments and transitions to keep your podcast script organized and help listeners understand where they are in your episode. For instance, you might divide your episode into chapters with their own titles or turn your lessons into numbered steps or tips. Write transition phrases into your podcast script to move between segments. For example, you might say, "Now that you understand the importance of user data, let's talk about the tools you need to collect it." Thank you for checking out our latest podcast. Make sure to visit our website at pod1media.com. If this is your first time listening, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss our next show. This has been a Pod1 Media production.